Hello, my name is Host Eric, and welcome to Talking with Famous People. I offer this welcome to you, friends, colleagues, strangers, acquaintances, and foes alike. Today we're going to be discussing the issue of diagnosis. Under the heading of There's Nothing Wrong with You, the central message of Talking with Famous People. It's my core message to you and to any person who might be watching this video. There is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. But that doesn't mean you won't get diagnosed, especially if you're an ENTP. You probably will be diagnosed. You probably have been diagnosed. You've probably done some diagnosing of others as well. Let's talk about what that means specifically. To diagnose someone is to say, you are not a viable other whose opinions have to be considered on their merits. I'm going to talk about your state of being as a human being in reference to a standard of wellness. And then I'm going to say, I'm really concerned about you because you are displaying unwell behaviors or you're giving signs of not being well. What they're really telling you is, I don't want to have to answer what you're saying. So I'm going to address what you're saying by reducing its legitimacy, by reducing the legitimacy of the individual saying it. Well, I heard the other day that blah, 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 blah. Well, who did you hear it from? Joe. Well, don't you know? He's an alcoholic and a crack addict. Well, don't you know that has nothing to do with whether his statements are true? So, number two, susceptibility to internalization. We don't necessarily automatically respond to these diagnoses as I just did, which is as a 44-year-old ENTP is going to, who's fought through enough battles and been on the other side of not giving in to the naysayers and seeing the naysayers proved wrong. I've been on the other side of that enough now that I believe. It takes a while, right? Because it's risky. You are going against everybody else, probably, or at least a substantial number of people, and they have no idea why you're doing what you're doing. They don't understand who you are at all. And yet, they're going to try to give you pushback anyway. They can't understand because they're not, unless they're another ENTP, they can't understand, okay? You will discover that even the smartest of the rationalists ultimately does not have the deftness that the detachment of the ENTP provides in terms of intellectualization, you know? So, okay. But until we get a little older and own it, we are very susceptible to internalizing some of these narratives, these assault narratives that are tossed our way. And that's what they are. They're ontological violence, right? You are being attacked, and instead of pulling out both AKs and letting loose, when we're young, we go, oh, I guess I am bad then, you know? So, especially because of our extroverted feeling is our motivating factor. What does that mean? It means that when we look at these other people and we're seeing these negative emotions from them, and we are bad at reading whether those emotions are about us or not, but, you know, we're not so bad that we're blind, and especially people are telling us directly things like, I'm concerned about you, you're acting unusual, and I'm worried, and things like that, okay? I rarely get it anymore because I've fought most of those battles already, you know? And I've gotten a fair amount of apologies out of people, you know, for delegitimizing me like that. And nobody wants to actually argue the point if they have to actually argue the point, right? They don't like to have to argue the point. Because arguing the point means, well, justify this diagnosis to me. And if you can't, then the issue of whether or not you need to justify it becomes central, right? And if, in fact, you do need to justify it and you can't, and you're making the diagnosis anyway, then what becomes the point of contention now is your behavior, not mine, right? So I've jumped way ahead. How to react well. Number 7 is how to react well. You do not react defensively. You react if you want to defend it all, first of all, I wouldn't even answer the points, right? It's like, don't even answer that shit. It's not worth answering directly, right? Because it's not an argument. It is an attack and nothing more. So there's no point in answering it. But if you are going to answer it, you answer it by simply saying, "Oh, well, that's. I'm very curious to hear what the justifications are because, I respect you and I afford you legitimacy. So I'd like to hear what your reasons are for demoting me a status level." Well, I mean, right? Because that's what they're doing, but they're not thinking it through. They're trying a technique that's worked for them before. And it sure as hell ain't gonna work on me. It shouldn't work on you either. Don't let it, okay? Remember, core message, there's nothing wrong with you. Susceptibility to internalization by NI. This is our gullibility thing. If we're getting these narratives from introverted intuitors, we instinctually, reflexively place a lot of faith in those people and their conclusions. So, if we allow them to drive that narrative uncontested for long, we're doing ourselves a great disservice. You got to contest these narratives directly. You got to turn it on them. Number 4, we are susceptible because we are outliers. We really are different. We really are extremely outside the conventional norms. And we really are quite distinct from one another, too, because ENTPs do share a lot of these traits. And ENTPs identify with the personality type really strongly. That does not mean that ENTPs are more alike to each other than other types are. In fact, we're more different. Why? Because we are explorers. And we are all every direction as soon as we're set free, Where we end up is going to look like a lot of different things. What's going to be the same is that whatever it is we're doing it really cleverly and really impressively and with little effort or preparation, It's just sort of our thing. But in terms of how we actually manifest in individuals, it has a lot to do with nature and a lot to do with our choices that we've made, So we're all outliers. We're all different from the norm. We all reject the norm sort of by gut because we recognize they're absurd and arbitrary. And so naturally, we're going to be able to see. We're also analytical. We have accuracy function strong. So we're going to go, well, this point they're making is right. This point they're making is right. I am different in this way and different in that way and different in that way. This argument only works when you're really young or on the younger side because at a certain point, ENTPs go, wait a second, but just because all of these other people do it this way and they all seem to be fine and have consensus that that's a good way to do it, 1, doesn't mean they're right. Number 2, it doesn't mean they're right for me. And number 3, it could mean that they are all defending the fact that you're enthusiastic about the issue at all or care so much about it means you're defending something you know is wrong. That's a likely possibility here. Okay, so number 5, axioms of interaction. When others diagnose you, it is never out of concern unless you actively sought the diagnosis first. Never. There are no exceptions. There aren't. If somebody is diagnosing you as unwell in some degree, it is either because they want you to behave differently or because they want to attack you. Either of those things is an attack. If somebody is going to want you to behave differently, there's only one legitimate way to get you to do that. And that's through honest, direct discourse, not through delegitimization. Okay, so how do you act badly? Well, you act badly by defending yourself. Don't defend yourself. It's a waste of your energy. You are affording them legitimacy when you defend yourself. What you do instead is explicitly don't address the diagnosis directly and say, okay, well, I'm I neither confirm, I neither affirm nor reject these claims of yours. But I'm going to analyze these claims as discourse instead, and why we probably ought not use in general this kind of language. Why we probably ought not use in general this kind of argumentation. If you say, that's not true, that's not me, that is exactly the worst possible thing you can do when somebody diagnoses you. If somebody diagnoses me, my response internally and externally is going to be the same. And you want your responses to be the same when people diagnose you internally and externally. It should be this. This person has not been put in check before and doesn't understand the damage that they potentially can do to people who aren't ready for these sort of things. What if this person had been diagnosing somebody other than me? What if they'd been diagnosing somebody who was suffering or in pain or something, you know? That person could be seriously harmed by that. I mean, that person is vulnerable to internalizing the lies. So you have to be really careful with this. So that's why I'm going to bust this person's chops. That should be your internal and your external narrative. And the chop busting should be a repetition of your internal narrative. How do we react well? Like that. How do we react badly? Nuh-uh. How to diagnose successfully battle. If you want to do it, you better be goddamn sure the person deserves it and is fully, needs to be smacked down hard. Because you're going big weapon here, right? It's a big one. If you do want to do it, though, as I indicated in a previous video I uploaded earlier, gaslighting is one approach. But you don't have to do the gaslighting. If you just want to piss them off, you go, well, I've been standing here listening to you for a while now, and I've got a bit of a laundry list of concerns I need to talk to you about. So, foremost, are you familiar with narcissistic personality disorder and the disregard of other individuals' feelings and the prioritization of individual values over what would be considered objective principle? No? Okay. Well, one of my concerns is displaying a lot of the pathologies associated with that. So, have you been to any sort of psychologist or anything? No? Okay. Well, other pathologies that I see you displaying are blah, blah, blah. You go like that, like you're doing a formal assessment on them. Like you've been hired to do that, you know? If you want to attack, do it like that, you know? And I mean, what is the other person going to do? Whatever the thing they were coming at you about suddenly is not even on the table anymore, right? You have to turn. Don't just counter. Countering's weak. Turn, right? Trust a debate coach on this one. So if anybody tries to pull this shit on you, turn that shit on them. It deserves to be turned on them. It's bullshit, right? All right, cool. Thank you for watching Talking with Famous People. Have a great day.